Okay, hi there, guys. We're about to start in about a minute or so. Okay, so this is the the 2-year anniversary of our AI portfolio, and I think it's a good time to just basically look back at what we've done, where the state of the industry is, etc., and how things have performed. And we'll give you an update as to the overall performance of the portfolio as well as what we've done in the last, few months or so. So this year, basically. So let's start with looking at, the little quote. This is by Walter Lippmann. He's a, reasonably well-known old-time journalist. You cannot endow even the best machine with initiative. The jolliest steamroller will not plant flowers. And the reason I put this up here is to show that this time is different. This time, our steamrollers will plant flowers if they want to. And we are entering that kind of era with things like agents, which are probably going to be a much bigger deal the next, say, 12 to 24 months than, they have been currently. I think we are about to see the emergence of AI systems where you can set them a task, not a prompt. Instead of saying, you are a business analyst, give me a plan to start a business, blah, blah, blah. You can say, create this business for me and, make it as profitable as possible. And it will do something with that. So yeah, that's the kind of era we're entering, the era of agents. And I think that's going to be when we start to see a real big improvement in terms of AI's impact on the economy. The other thing I think is going to be really impactful on the economy is robotics. And so this is the agenda for today. So we're going to have an introduction as usual. Then we look at models and basically give you an outline of the most recent models that have come out and what the state of the art right now looks like. Then we'll start talking about agents. Then we'll look at chips, basically the things that are used to make these models and systems, etc. And then we look at robots. And then finally, we end up with a look at AI portfolio performance, what our portfolio has done over the last year, basically, year to date effectively, as well as since inception. And then I'll tell you what our most recent change has been to the portfolio. So, and a reasoning behind why we've done it as well. So let us begin by, the usual Ransom's introduction. So Ransom's, as you know, top stockbroker awards, we've won it multiple times in the past. We are the number one, service provider in the country. Multiple awards, from 2019 basically till last year. And hopefully we'll continue to basically earn your guys' approval going forward as well. These are the different divisions at Ransom's. There's securities broking, which is basically more active. There's managed solutions where you basically give us your money and say, basically manage this portion of my money. And wealth, where you say, this is my life, this is my overall wealth, etc. Help me plan, a good retirement, help me plan, estate planning, etc. And of course, the guys, it's me, Gary, Yaku, Kyle. We will be adding more people in the next couple of months or so. And, next time I'll probably do this update will be a few more people on this list in terms of representatives that you can talk to. And of course, our partners, we've done, work with 91, Swissquote, Alan Gray, DMA, Velocity, Signia, ABSA, Nedbank, Momentum, it was all the big providers in South Africa and a few internationally as well. So introduction, let us begin the meat of this presentation. So when I first had this presentation 2 years ago, I said the only danger to the portfolio would be if artificial intelligence has hit a wall. The wall meaning that there will come a time in which the things that we're doing with artificial intelligence will stop showing improvement. We have not done that yet. And the reason that we know we have not hit a wall is a couple things. Firstly, to be fair, the original way that we did artificial intelligence was done 2 years ago. That kind of petered out as, we saw when GPT 4.5 came out, it wasn't as big an improvement as, people had been hoping for. But at the same time, they invented reasoning, which basically allowed the next step to go forward. So in terms of overall performance, we have not seen a wall being hit. Benchmarks are being constantly, improved upon. Things that were, at one time considered to be quite difficult, even like tests as to the abilities of AI, or people thought AI could not do, uh, are being hit, by the next model. An example of this was a recent paper by Apple, in which some Apple scientists came out and said, there's some reasoning that AI can't do. And the example they used was the Towers of Hanoi, which is basically an example. We have this children's game. We have like three pillars, and you have like different size, like uh, how can I say, like discs on them, and you basically have to move, all from one pillar to another pillar, and you got to basically swap things around. It's a children's game effectively, and models at the time, according to this thing, could not do this. Particular children's game, which any smart child could learn to do in no time. But the next model did it, and that is the kind of stuff that you see continuously happening with AI models. There's many examples that people put forward as, oh, AI can't do this simple thing. The next model does that simple thing. There was this ARC AGI test that was put forward to show things that AI could not do. Most recent models have improved on it so much they have to make an ARC 2 version, and probably the next couple of years they have to do an ARC 3 version. And there was something called it's called Humanity's Last Exam, which is basically what they did was they went out and found experts in different fields, and had them basically pose what they thought were very difficult questions in different fields. And it was so broad across so many different fields that no single human being would be able to answer more than about 4 or 5%. The best models now can do double digits on this particular thing. And the improvement has been spectacular. And I would expect fully in the next couple of years that the best model will be doing like, in excess of 50% on this test. And this is kind of similar to what we saw when we had, things like chess models and so on, coming through, that once they hit human level, they went beyond human level and kept on going, until a point where the best humans are nowhere close to where the best systems are. This was with regard to chess. With regards to Go, we are likely to get there with regards to a lot of the other stuff that people think this is what a human being can do easily. AI models can't do. This is going to be, again, areas where we are going to see these models hit human level and go beyond it very quickly. So another proof that the wall has not been hit is that Nvidia hit $4 trillion. To give you an idea what that means, $4 trillion is about $1 trillion more than what Apple is worth, which was the big company until a couple of years ago. And it was the first company to hit basically $1 trillion in 2019. It was Apple. So AI has not just improved in terms of performance, it's improving in terms of market impact. And the way I'd always phrase these things, if you have a situation in which you don't have complete information, look at what the guys with more information are doing. What are we doing in this current environment? How are we, operating, and what are we seeing from the people that would know the most? And what other people know the most are doing is spending more money. And we have started to see in the last, few months or so, these massive talent poaching, initiatives. What's been happening here is that we are seeing that, the amount of money that people are willing to spend in order to procure talent has gone to levels that we have not seen in the past. I remember when I first did this presentation with you 2 years ago, I discussed the fact that we are seeing AI scientists being hired at the same kind of, salaries at, entry-level NFL quarterbacks were being paid. We were talking about $10 million salaries, which was, I thought at the time, spectacular. This year, we are starting to see the $100 million salaries. We're seeing $100 million signing bonuses. Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, basically went out and poached the head of Apple AI for $200 million. We saw recently a company called Windsurf being purchased by Google, not purchased by Google, but the main members, the CEO and the top management and the 40 best people there being taken out for about $2.5 billion. We've seen Mark Zuckerberg, again, Meta, offering huge salaries to OpenAI staff members. And I think he hired 9 people, basically with these $100 million signing bonuses, $100 million annual salaries, in addition to the $100 million signing bonuses, and a $300 million potential bonus. So $500 million, you know, potential yearly income. You know what I mean? That is insane amounts of money. And why would they be doing this? This is what you would do when you're coming to the end of the game and you think to yourself that, we're getting to a point where we're about to solve these huge problems, and therefore spending this kind of money to get a head start or get a slight advance on your competitors at this point in the game is worth it. And quite frankly, they're not the only ones doing it. Like I said, we are seeing across the board insane amounts of money being spent on signing talent, in how we're going to phrase it. At the same time, we are seeing other disruptions in the labor force that we'll discuss a bit later, especially around computer scientists and new graduates in the field. Also, in the last little while, tariffs have come into play, as well as sanctions, and we'll discuss that a bit later. But basically, some of the restrictions that have been put forward on things like Nvidia, etc., a little while back, have been removed, or at least it hasn't gone through in the worst form that people had feared. And I think to a certain extent, this also indicates that the thing is that the competition is heating up to such an extent that you've got to be smart about how you do things. The fear around sanctions has been that what happens when you sanction, China when it comes to chips? You sanction South Africa, we can't get chips. You sanction China, they build their own chip industry. And that's kind of been what's been happening over the last couple of years. And now the fact that they're releasing these sanctions, releasing some of these tariffs, could indicate that, players in the US are realizing that this is not a thing where you want to basically give Huawei a huge head start in terms of market access, etc., by effectively handing them not just the Chinese chip sector, but the Indian chip sector and much of the world's chip sector outside, for instance, the trusted countries that the Americans are willing to sell things to, like the UK, etc. So let's begin. Models. So one of the things we had in the last little while was something called distillation. What you are able to do here is you're able to take a model, say a larger model, much more well-trained model, then just ask it questions. And from those questions, you kind of distill in certain ways to a smaller model that does almost as well as a big model, but it's far lower cost and far lower, inference, etc. That was what the big innovations from a company called DeepSeek in China did. That is something that I think is going to progress going forward. So you're likely to find that whatever the best model right now is, let's just say Grok 4 or GPT or 3 or something, or 3 from OpenAI, you will find that using these kind of technologies, etc., you'll probably get a smarter or a slightly dumber model, but much cheaper than the current model available in a few months' time. Whatever the premium model is right now, it's like imagine you get a Ferrari, which is like the best, fastest car you can get, but you can somehow use that Ferrari, like that really expensive car, and kind of distill it and make a car that's almost as good for a fraction of the price. And that's what's going to be happening going forward. Whatever the premium version of a model is right now, understand that model is going to be distilled, going to be compressed down into a much cheaper model in 6 months to a year's time, if not a shorter period of time. So whatever you see as being the premium model out now, be it Grok Heavy, be it like I said, O3, those models are going to be the free models in 6 months' time. And that shows that the progression in terms of, bringing that technology down to the masses is still happening at a really quick rate. Next, Grok 4, which is Elon Musk's, AI model, is topping all the benchmarks. It just was released in the last couple of weeks, and it's topping all the benchmarks. And this has become a pattern that we've seen. Whichever the newest model is the best model or close to the best model. Now, I'll mention a fact here that this is the best model according to benchmarks. It's not anywhere close to the best model according to perception. Okay, according to user ratings, I think it's like the 60th or 66th worst model, best model. Basically, it's this not just like there's 66 models or 65 models considered to be better than Grok 4, according to human evaluation. And you've seen, of course, Grok 4 also doing things like, using anti-Semitic memes, saying really bad things, describing how you would, commit certain kinds of crimes, giving you plans for it, etc. Uh, so there are issues with the model, but if we have to measure these things in some way, and every way we use to measure it is usually benchmarks, usually like tests, like that's the ARC test, etc., etc. And Grok 4 is beating other models at these tests. It's able to do things like use tools, which is an important thing that we'll talk about later when it comes to agents. But I'm not here to talk about how great Grok 4 is. What I want you to understand is the following, that when you have a situation where whatever is newest is the best, you are seeing significant improvements or rates of improvement in technology. When something released just 2 months later is almost always considered to be the best model, you are in a situation in which the technology is improving so fast that even a 2 or 3 month difference in time is resulting in something that's objectively better than what came before it. And as long as we see that happening, as long as we don't see the best model being something from last year, the technology continues to improve at a pretty fast rate. We've also seen the delay of GPT-5. Now, they claim it's for safety, which is possible, but considering some of the history we have with people like Sam Altman, etc., I don't know if that's true. It could very well be that Grok 4 was just so much better than what was anticipated that they wanted to have a little more time to improve GPT-5 so it maintained the best of model. Remember, GPT-3, we had 4, then we had 4 point some stuff. Now we're looking for 5. When you have that 4 to 5 movement, that big change in number, you need to have something that's substantially better. You can't just be the difference between 4 and 4.5 coming out here. This has to be a huge step change up. And I think maybe Grok 4 was, good enough that maybe they feared that they would not have as a big an advantage of a Grok 4 as they would like, and therefore they delayed it a little bit. But there's also the possibility it is a case of safety, because one thing we have seen with Grok 4, like I mentioned, the thing about Hitler, the thing about committing crimes, the willingness to really break rules, etc. Elon Musk has really cut back on safety with regards to XAI's training and etc. In fact, it's been pointed out that normally when these models are released, there is a extra bit of information or documentation given out about safety. And Grok 4 did not have that, which is until recently an industry standard, and they broke that. So safety is being compromised here. Make no doubt about that. And one of the reasons that XAI was able to, like less than about a year or so, get 2 years, sorry, about 2 years or so, get to a point where they went from nothing to effectively creating a system that's arguably the best in the world, and is maybe strong enough to make the leader, which is GPT-5, delay the release of his next model, was because they are cutting back on safety. And that's going to be a pattern I see going forward. You are not going to see the safest models. And by the way, the safest model is Anthropic, Claude. Anthropic is by far the company that's most ethical when it comes to safety. And you're seeing usage of Claude, even though it's been shown to be one of the better models when it comes to things like programming, kind of suffer because of that. Next, a new pricing regime. So when these things first came out, it was free and a $20 pricing. Now there is free at $20 pricing and somewhere between a $200 and a $500, also $200 and like about $400, $500 pricing coming in here. We've seen that $200 to $300 pricing coming with, for instance, what's been coming up with Grok. We've seen OpenAI discuss that. We've seen a number of different companies out there bringing that up again. So we have free, we have low paying, $200, and then now we have high paying, which is going to be the multiple $100. We're talking 4, 5, 6,000 rounds effectively per month in terms of pricing for the upper end of the model. We're also starting to see per usage kind of things going out there, especially around video. And so we've seen people like, put $100, $500, $1,000 budget making videos. And, that is kind of like also something to be done. I think, again, this is why they're doing this is not just because they want to make back the money they spent on the model. Is that running these models itself is expensive. The inference is expensive. But going back to the distillation part, you take this model, distill it down, it's almost the same quality model, a fraction of the price. And that's going to be something we're going to be seeing, like I said, a few months from now. Whatever Grok 4 is doing right now, you'll be able to get that for free effectively or on a much lower pricing level versus the upper pricing level in the next, I would say, 6 months or so. The same thing with GPT-5. Whatever GPT-5 is giving out right now or whenever it comes out, wait 6 months and it's probably going to be the majority of the benefit of GPT-5 will be available on the free level. Forget about the low paid level. Also, we are starting to see some real benefits coming through from some of these non-LLM models. So always remember that LLMs are just part of AI. We've had other things out there as well. And we talked in the past about things like isomorphic labs and AlphaFold and so on. But just one thing I want to point out is a new thing from, I think it's the University of Pennsylvania, it's called Apex. And what this was it modeled a bunch of molecules and it found about 53 potential antibiotics from looking at things like, different animal venoms and so on. What's so important about this? We are 53 new antibiotics. Even half that number would be more than all the antibiotics we have, currently available. And antibiotics are important because, firstly, anyone that's ever been to surgery, ever been, have an infection, knows that, antibiotics are essential. They're life-saving. But the problem with antibiotics is the more we use them, the more bacteria adjust to the antibiotic, and over time they develop a resistance to it. That's why sometimes you have these antibiotic resistance infections that nothing can kill except for some super protected antibiotics that are kept only for special circumstances. But even over time those will fail as well. The fact that we have about 53 potential new antibiotics is world changing. It's very, very important. And that is something I think that must not be ignored. There's other stuff happening in the AI space beyond LLMs, beyond these normal models we talk about, things like Apex, things like AlphaFold, etc., that are really, really going to impact how the world works. And bringing it back to safety. So Grok 4 not only broke the safety stuff around, things like Mecha Hitler and stuff that we talked about, but when AI first was discussed, one of the things that people were always worried about was AI chatbots, people developing, parasocial relationships with chatbots. Grok 4 leans into this heavily. And now you may laugh and you may think that this is something that's, just a little quirky thing for weird people. But there's been enough evidence out there that a substantial portion of the population is going to be becoming addicted to these chatbots if they have these kind of personalities, interfaces, or how you want to call these things. And the fact that Grok 4 is leading into this, I think it's going to be a real problem going forward. A kind of problem that's not just going to be something that's bad for society. A kind of problem I think is going to result in legislation around them. Because you are going to see these AI companions, these AI, chatbots, whatever, they are going to be, I think, resulting in some kind of legislative backlash. Next, moving on to agents. Now, what is an agent? Now, by now, I'm sure if you listen to this podcast, this thing, or you're watching this thing, you basically probably have played with AI. I'm assuming everybody here has typed a prompt into something at some point in time. And you know what the current kind of models do. You want to basically start a business. You have a plan for a business. Say, AI, I want to start a business in this area. Give me a business plan and maybe adjust that business plan. It gives you a plan, you take that plan and you do stuff with it. What could be the new systems that we do going forward with agents? Hey, GPT-6, whatever you want to call it. I want to open a business in Johannesburg, South Africa. Do it for me. GPT-6 would go off, go to the relevant government agency, would fill in the forms, would pay the fees because they had access to your bank account. It would basically negotiate the lease for the property. It may even hire the people. Who knows what level it could be? That's an agent. Now you can see how different, the use cases is for agents versus for the kind of prompt stuff that we have currently. Prompt stuff, you have the human involved in a lot of the decisions that go along the way. With an agent, you kind of give it a goal and have that agent exercise that goal. With a prompt, you're kind of asking a question, you're kind of making it say, create something for me, but you're not saying create this book and then get the book published. You know what I mean? An agent does that. Create the book, you can maybe do an LLM. Getting the book published is something you would ask an agent to do. And these agents are coming along pretty fast. In fact, there's almost a Moore's law with the agents. But those that don't know what Moore's law is it was a law around transistors. And basically it was that every couple of years you double the amount of transistors for the same amount of money. Okay. And that was Moore's law. And it worked for decades. In fact, it kind of, some definitions still works today. And over decades, doubling every 2 years, what you do is you get from, one transistor for $1 to millions of transistors for $1. And that's the impact of a exponential growth rate. We are starting to see that with agents. Agents basically, one of the ways to define how good an agent is how long the task we can put in front of it is. If it's a task that usually takes 10 seconds, agents do really well at. If it's a task that takes a year to basically get out and do, agents are terrible at that. But what we are seeing is that over time, the amount of time an agent can basically, on average, be relied to do a task is increasing, and increasing at what seems to be a predictable rate, a predictable exponential rate, like with Moore's law. Now, I'm not to say there's not going to be, either jump ups and slow downs that are unexpected. There are definitely going to be that. But if you look at it over a long enough time period, there is a smoothness to this that's very important. And this is one of the things I want you to see here. So look at this. This is a graph from 2020 to about 2025 and predictions into 2026. There is basically a chart, right, that's showing you and GPT-2 could not do something that lasted more than a couple of seconds before it went off track. GPT-3, a few more seconds. By this year, we started getting models that are in the minutes range. In fact, we started getting models in the minute range like last year, the year before. Now we're starting to get models that are going into like the 30-minute range. And in fact, models that are approaching the 1.5 hour range. Okay. Now, to be clear about this, when you have models running for this amount of time, there's a lot of energy, a lot of capital behind it. So you're going to have to spend a lot more money on this. This is not going to be like the free stuff. You just go and say, okay, do a task for 1.5 hours and that's going to be a free thing. No, this is something that's going to be costing you money. But remember, the task that it is doing is a task that are going to be something where you'd have paid an individual, hundreds of dollars to do that, like thousands of dollars. And so taking the same thing and paying tens of dollars to do this task for an hour is not a bad trade-off. It could be, still something which you are paying like significant amounts of money. This is not something you'd say, oh, do this task for free, and it's just going to be something that does like as a nominal cost. You may be paying $10, $20, $50 to do this task, one task. But you'd have paid some human being $100, maybe $1,000 to do the same task. And note that the cost here is about the amount of energy and the chips being used to do this thing, all of which are improving at pretty substantial, clips. So if it costs you $100 today, it might cost you in a year's time $10, and maybe 2-3 years' time down to $1. Okay. At the same time, look at these models. We are starting to see 1.5 hour, 1 hour tasks that are being done here. If you go back and you look at, for instance, sorry, back here. Okay. You go back and you look at the kind of jobs that take a few seconds to do. There's not many jobs that require that. But most jobs basically would go away if you have an agent that could handle something for 8 hours. You know, there's very few people at that job that need tasks that require more than 8 hours worth of like time or concentration to accomplish. The impact on jobs, if this basically becomes a real thing, is going to be quite significant. And we are starting to see that happening with entry-level jobs, especially because the way most people enter the workforce is they get simple tasks and then they get more complicated tasks over time. You may graduate from university with a nice degree, but when you go into the workforce, there's simple tasks that you're given, and over time you start getting more and more complicated tasks. And the area in which these programs have really, really taken off quicker than almost any other area is in computer science basically in programming. And you're starting to see, look here, computer engineering has one of the highest unemployment rates of any degree out there. We're talking 7.5%. Computer science, 6.1%. These are numbers that are approaching, what you would consider to be non-stable kind of jobs like fine arts, 7%. You may ask yourself, why is anthropology? Anthropology is 9.4%. This is not something you would say, okay, it's a stable career path. Physics, majors generally, you're not going to find, people out there with undergraduate physics degrees getting jobs as physicists. You know what I mean? Maybe you might argue that, this might be something where there's a lot of brain power and maybe they could find something elsewhere, but, ignore that. But a computer engineering degree having a high unemployment rate, okay, this is a degree for a particular set of jobs, as opposed to a physics degree or anthropology degree, which is more, how can I say, yeah, study physics. But there's not a job for physicists that's like every company has to have a physicist. You have an engineer. Okay, computer engineering is it's a professional job. It's like being a doctor. It's like being a lawyer. An unemployment rate of 7.5%. Next one, graphic design. What do these models do very, very well? It is, create art, create graphic designs, etc. That is something I think that in terms of what's happened with the AI, you could actually attribute the 7.2% for graphic design also possibly to AI. Okay. Sociology has a lower, unemployment rate than computer engineer. Computer science, it's 6.1%. Information systems, pretty high. We are starting to see early stage careers in fields around the computer science area starting to show an oversupply in the labor market. Now, you may say to yourself, maybe this is what these things do best. They do computer science best. It could also be that you're trying to build AI, artificial intelligence. Who are you? You're a computer scientist. What is the thing that you think defines intelligence? It's probably computer science, it's probably programming. It could very well be that the reason that we're seeing computer science and programming be one of the first areas to fall to AI is because the people that are creating it think that computer science and AI and mathematics are things that are at the highest end of intelligence, and therefore that's some of the things that they focus the AI program on. But over time, it's quite possible that we'll see other fields, law, etc., also fall to this kind of system as well. And I do think that we are starting to see a situation in which the impact on jobs is becoming a problem, and agents are probably going to be the thing going forward that is going to be driving this. And one final thing I want to mention is agents need agency, as the word would say. An agent needs agency. You have a goal for something. You have to have a desire to accomplish that goal. You give a goal to a program, the program has to have some kind of inbuilt desire to get that goal accomplished. And if you look at most of these AI safety kind of like concerns, the agency is really important. Is when these things have a desire to do something. And I don't mean that they have a point of view. I don't mean they have consciousness. I mean, they display actions as if they have a desire to do something. You give that to a model, it really, really could translate into something that's very dangerous. You have a model running for 8 hours, you know, pursuing some goal that you've given it. The chance of that thing really going off track and doing something that's dangerous is quite high. And the more intelligent that model is, the more things it's capable of doing that could be dangerous. Okay, now moving on to chips. We mentioned Nvidia, the $4 trillion company, the first $4 trillion company. As I last saw, it was $4.18 trillion. Apple was about $3.18 trillion. So, really taking off, Nvidia. Apple, by the way, though it's in my portfolio and I had to have it in there, has been a big disappointment when it came to AI. They really have not pursued the AI, race as strongly as other companies have, like Microsoft or Oracle or many of these other companies. You would think that Apple would be one of the companies best suited to doing this, but you've seen in the past, for instance, with Microsoft, you would have thought Microsoft would be the company that really dominated the internet era because they were so powerful in the pre-internet era. Never happened. I mean, we had Googles, we had Facebooks, and all those kind of things happening. They made no impact on mobile phones, okay, and mobile technology. And you would have thought Microsoft would really be at least as good as Apple when it came to mobile. And it's quite possible that Apple is where Microsoft was back in the past. It's been run by a manager as opposed to a founder. And then maybe you require a founder to be willing to go out and spend, a couple $100 million hiring a single individual, or $2.5 billion hiring like 50 people. Which I think is something that maybe Tim Cook is unable to do, considering his position in the company. Who knows? But anyway, $4 trillion Nvidia. But we're also seeing AMD do reasonably well this year. Intel, IBM has done okay. Intel is still in the doldrums. TSMC just had results released recently. Good results. For those that don't know, TSMC, this is how the system works. Nvidia designs the chip. TSMC makes the chip with machines made by a company called ASML. So ASML makes the machines. The machines are then used by TSMC to make chips, and the chips are designed by Nvidia. Okay. TSMC is massively profitable. They're showing a 60+% improvement in earnings. Share price going up dramatically. ASML has not done as well. And this is one of the things that really does not make sense from a larger point of view, because ASML is probably the irreplaceable company in the world. There's one company that makes these machines that can be used to make these chips. No other company can do this. China, in the world's largest or second largest economy, where we're designated, cannot replicate ASML's technology. Other companies can do what TSMC is doing. Other companies can approach NVIDIA's thing. Nobody can do what ASML is doing. Yet that company is really being a laggard. Next, China. So with China, I mentioned to you, this is the big competitor to the US. The US is not just the US. The US is ASML, which is European. It's TSMC, which is Taiwan. There's a whole ecosystem that the US is operating, plus NVIDIA, which is American. The Chinese are operating more of an internal thing. Now, in China, we have had progress. Huawei has come out with some incredibly powerful chips, more powerful than people thought they'd be able to do in this current time frame. People thought they were years behind. Maybe they are 6 months behind. But they are doing it through inefficient means. There's still significant technological, disadvantages they have versus the US, European, Taiwanese system combined. But they are progressing. And that is why the sanctions change that has happened recently is important. So Trump comes into power. Trump puts massive sanctions on China in terms of AI technology. There were sanctions in advance previously to that. Nvidia went out and created chips that were able to pass through the sanctions because they were not strong enough for to be a concern to the US. Trump comes in, changes his laws, made even those chips illegal to export to China. So Nvidia is making chips that were certain level for the US and other countries, lower level for China. Trump says no, even the lower level ones were not good enough. And now he's kind of relaxed that, and he has allowed a certain kind of lower level chip to go to China. The idea behind this is the following. You basically sell like muskets to the Chinese to hobble their companies to make sure they don't make enough money to make companies that can make machine guns. So you're giving them lower level tech so that their companies don't have the money to go and develop higher level tech. So Huawei is going to have a smaller market to sell its stuff to because it's getting all these cheap chips coming in from Nvidia, and therefore they don't have enough money to go out and develop the high-end chips that might be a threat to Nvidia in the future. I personally don't think this is a realistic thing. Why? Do you honestly think that the Chinese government is going to just let Huawei, make its chips based only on the money it's making from, its own businesses? Do you really think the Chinese government is not going to be willing to subsidize Huawei if it thinks it's a viable way to get to the higher end chip production? Definitely not. What's likely going to happen here, these sanctions chips are going to go through. The Chinese are probably going to find ways to make them outperform what they were hobbled, around. So they get a bit of a kick from that, allowing to develop better models. By the way, the DeepSeek model we talked about, if you go to their website for the company, they really boast about the fact that they have the most Nvidia chips in China. Nvidia chips are still the best. But they are probably able to get these chips from, the low-level chips and probably able to do something with them. But at the same time, I have no doubt it's not going to slow down the progress of Huawei. Next, robots. So self-driving, I would say to you, is solved in the most in-demand areas. Which are the most in-demand areas? Urban areas. When it comes to urban driving, I would say to you that self-driving is pretty much solved. How do we know this? Waymo. Waymo operates in San Francisco and a couple other cities in the US, done in excess of 10 million rides without a single fatality, without a single major accident. 10 million rides. You can imagine what this means. You do 100 rides a day. Imagine a driver that do 100 trips a day. You do it for a year. That's 35,000 trips. Not 10 million. You do that for 100 years. That's 3.5 million rides. 100 rides a day for 100 years is a third of the rides that Waymo has done so far. Can you imagine any human being doing that many trips and not having a single fatality or major accident? 100 rides a day for 100 years, every day for 100 years. Not likely. So if Waymo can do that, it probably means that it's at least as safe as a human driver, probably safer. By any definition, that's how you would say self-driving is solved. Look, it's not perfect. It can't go on any road. It can only go in a geo-fenced area. So basically, they say within this particular area, it knows the roads well enough that it can drive by its own. There's also, let us be fair, a backup, a human backup to this thing, remote backup. But it doesn't matter if it's remote backup. It doesn't matter if it's a geo-fenced area. This would replace a lot of human drivers. Tesla is also launched its self-driving taxi thing in Austin with also a geo-fenced area. They have a vision of getting it non-geo-fenced eventually. But even if it is geo-fenced, even if all the stuff stops right now, and all we have is Waymo's technology, it would basically change transport across every single major metropolitan area in the world. And I'm talking about anywhere with more than a couple 100,000 people, okay? You might have a taxi that has to drive you around some small, 10,000 people town. But if you're in any major metropolitan area anywhere in the world, Johannesburg, London, Paris, Tokyo, the Waymo technology basically is fine. And this is an example of what's happened in San Francisco. So you can see that when Waymo came into play back in August 2023, it had zero. Okay, obviously, just started off. It's gone from 0 to in excess of 25% of all rides, okay, in about just a year and a half, okay, or just over a year and a half, under 2 years, effectively. It's overtaken Lyft. Lyft has dropped from, above 25% to below 25%. And you can see a lot of that is Waymo. But also, Uber has dropped a similar amount. You know what I mean? Waymo is definitely taking up, market share from these companies. And it's been less than 2 years. Put that out 5 years into the future. And I'd be very surprised if Waymo is not the number one, taxi company in San Francisco. And understand this. It's not just because it's cheaper. It's not cheaper yet because the technology is pretty expensive, but technology goes down in price. The stuff used to make the cars, the system that they used to drive, etc., will become cheaper in 5 years' time than it is right now. People are actively choosing Waymo for reasons beyond just pricing. It's about safety, it's about comfort, about not having to deal with a human driver and so on. Like I said, you put this out to 5 years into the future, and you're going to have a situation in which, you're going to be seeing a massive disruption to the global transport system. Next, BYD. BYD is a Chinese, company, and they are effectively giving you a Tesla-level vehicle at about half the price. And I think that is, you'll see, not to give you a better spoiler, guess what we added to our portfolio in the last quarter. This is, again, something that's going to be really coming into play going forward. Now, my argument around self-driving is that once you have self-driving, and you can get a vehicle to basically do that, moving it onto other vehicles that are not just used for transport might be not that difficult. Bulldozers, construction equipment, I think is going to be very, very significant. If you could basically have a bulldozer come that's AI thing and say, dig that hole, and give it the parameters for the hole, and have it do it, that would be a pretty significant thing in the world. I think at the moment, there is a lot more of that kind of construction happening in the world than most people realize. Moving stuff from like one thing to another thing, digging holes, transporting stuff from a warehouse to another warehouse, or from a truck to a warehouse, or moving things within a warehouse. If you can transport a human being in San Francisco in rush hour traffic safely, you can probably dig a hole. You can probably transport pallets in a warehouse, especially if there's no human beings around you. So I think that is probably the next level coming through with robotics. Now, obviously, the main thing people talk about is humanoid robots, and everyone talks about the Optimus, and everybody talks about, the Figure robot and so on. I honestly think that's a bit further out. I think the use case for it, number one, is less than people think. Automated bulldozers and automated forklifts and, construction equipment is probably more impactful to the world than humanoid robots, in terms of GDP. It might be useful in terms of things like home usage. A robot comes around, cooks your dinner, cleans your house. Maybe that might be useful to you. But in the world of like construction, the world of manufacturing, all those kind of things, I don't think they are that useful. Then the final thing is non-humanoid robots, and especially things around warfare. And I think that is really taken off in a way that people don't realize. In places like Russia and Ukraine, it's almost like a testing ground for this technology. And we are starting to see the emergence of drones with Nvidia chips in them, meaning that the people are running AI systems, which means one of the ways you stop a drone is to jamming it. You kind of shoot an electric impulse and you jam the signal it gets. Without that signal, it's a dumb machine and it just basically falls to the ground, or it becomes useless. If, however, it has an inbuilt AI system, it doesn't need to have a human operator. It doesn't need to be operated by remote control, and therefore jamming no longer impacts it as badly. And that becomes a far different proposal of the battlefield than we've had in the past. And like I said, we have started to see Shahed drones, which are things made by Iran that are used by Russia in Ukraine, being found with Nvidia chips in them. We're definitely likely to see the same thing happen in Ukraine because, of course, Ukraine doesn't have the same kind of restrictions in regards to like access to some of these chips. We're going to be finding, especially if we see conflict take off for the next couple of years. I mean, we've seen one of the largest increases year on year in terms of military expenditure in the last year. If you followed stocks globally, you've seen that European defense stocks have been some of the best performing stocks globally, even rivaling the performance of AI and tech stocks in the US. This build out of European defense is not going to happen with the traditional technologies only. It's going to happen with some of this war stuff that we see coming forward here. And that is obviously something to be concerned about in the future as well. Okay. Now, moving on to the AI portfolio. By the way, if you want to ask questions, feel free to. There's the chat we have here. There is the Q&A section. Just type it in. And I'm more than willing to answer any kind of questions on what we've discussed so far. So just start adding your questions now and we'll come back to them in a second, okay? So the AI portfolio. So this is the performance of the portfolio so far. Up 70+% since inception, which was in June 2023. In that same time, the S&P 500 has done 43.3%. It's up 19+% this year. And this year, the S&P has done 6.3%. So outperformed significantly over 2 years and even more significantly year to date. Now, we had a dip a couple of months ago, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, this is the performance year to date. You can see that from about March to about May, it was negative for the year. At one point in time, it almost hit 20% negative for the year. But since then, we've recovered significantly. And you can see in terms of the overall performance of this thing, it's basically outperformed by over 13% basically year to date. There have been a few months where we've underperformed, like in February, March, we were below the performance of the S&P 500, which are best, or the S&P 500 tech stocks, which is our benchmark. Okay, so we benchmark ourselves against that particular. Someone's. Okay, so sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. So we underperformed for 2 months when the market really fell significantly. But when it recovered, we recovered much faster. And already by April, we were outperforming the benchmark. And now we've outperformed it by, like I said, 13+% for the year. If you look at it from a point of view of since inception, like I said, the S&P 500 has done 43% in that time. We've done about 72.8. Okay, so we've done, almost 30% outperformance, 29 points of change outperformance versus the S&P 500 in the 2+ years. And this is in a time in which the S&P basically has done, like I said, 43% in 2 years for the S&P is significantly above historical averages. That's closer to something you'd get in 4 to 5 years, not in 2 years. And even in this really strong period of outperformance, we've outperformed this benchmark by, like I said, 30% versus 43%. That's like 75% outperformance. So it's been a really good return on this index over this last little while. And the question then has to come, do you think this will go carry on going forward? Going back to the first bit of it, so long as we don't hit the wall in technology, so long as we don't see the technology slowing down or stopping progress, AI is going to be a bigger part of the world. Where is it going to get its money from? Well, I just identified 2 areas. Agents, number one, which could replace a significant amount of white-collar jobs. and robotics, number two, which could be replacing a significant number of blue-collar jobs, especially around driving. Okay, those are multi-trillion dollars yearly revenue streams. Okay, that could be used to justify this. The more this thing progresses, the more things become available to do with it. In fact, with robotics, I would say we don't even need to have progression too much further with regards to self-driving. All we need to have is costs decreasing with regards to the cost of making the equipment. And we've already seen that. We've seen stuff out of China recently with LiDAR, which in the US, which what the systems that Waymo is using cost thousands of dollars, going for hundreds of dollars in China. So we're already seeing the technology dropping from that point of view. But that level of performance taken across the entire globe would result in massive disruptions in transport globally, which alone would be an industry that's worth looking at. You add on, construction vehicles, mining vehicles, another multi-trillion-dollar industry that you can be looking at. Then you add on the amount that's going towards things like warfare. Again, just look at the prices, the valuations on these defense stocks in Europe and the US in the last couple of years. Again, massive industries. That's with robotics. With agents, already at 1.5, hours for the best agents out there, and doubling roughly every 7 months or so. We would be in, say, 2 years, up to a point where these agents are able to do roughly a day's work without interference. How many people would that be able to replace? Again, huge opportunities in terms of revenue for these companies. Now, not to say that there won't be disruptions across the world. There will be, but this is the kind of timeline we're seeing going forward. And so, yes, we've had a massive improvement in these share prices over the last 2 years, but in the current trajectory, it does appear that we have more runway. There's more opportunity for these companies to make money. There is more progress still occurring, and that is going to translate, I think, into higher stock prices going forward. Now, here are the changes we've seen come through in the last quarter for the portfolio. Salesforce and Baidu are out. Why? Salesforce, I think, you would think that they would have an advantage when it came to these agents and some of the AI stuff that's available out there. Unfortunately, I don't think that their plan has really worked out. They are still AI focused. They are talking about 1 billion AI agents via Salesforce alone in the next 2 years. Okay, 1 billion, that's adding a country larger than China's workforce to the global population just by one company, which is Salesforce. But I don't see the advantage they would have over other companies. That's why I'm kind of selling out of them. Baidu has not really been able to take advantage of the AI kind of boom that we've seen out there. Now, I know that we are seeing, developments in China that are quite interesting. And that's why I'm buying BYD, which is the Chinese car company. BYD, I think, is probably the company best suited in the world to take advantage of the robotics revolution that's about to come about, if it does come about. They make electric vehicles. They, like I said, are able to produce Tesla quality vehicles at half the price. They are able to, access the manufacturing hub that is China in a very strong way. And so if we do, for instance, have humanoid robots or even non-humanoid robots really take off in the next 2 to 3 years, the company that I would say is best suited to take advantage of that globally, with the possible exception of Tesla, is BYD. And that's why it has been the company they've added to the portfolio. Salesforce, they have a vision for AI that I think is probably good. But the reason that we've pulled back from them is that I just don't think that their execution will be correct. I don't think that they are the likely path that's going to win that particular race. And Baidu as well out, like I said, because of the fact that I don't think that they are John Block asked me about NIO, so I don't know. Give me more details. I don't know that linkage. Let me see what it looks like. Second. Maybe I know it by another name. No, I haven't looked at it in detail. Give me a bit of time and I'll get back to you, John Brandon, on it. Um, and I'll look at it in more detail. It's a smaller company. It's about a 9.24 billion market cap, and it's not something I've been following until recently. So I will look at it and I'll get back to you, John. Just put your details in there. Would Google Alphabet be an entry point to way more success instead of Uber? Yes, definitely. I think Google Alphabet is, if you want to buy one company right now and say, I bought one company and it's the AI company and that's it, it's Google Alphabet. Why? So look at all the way Google makes money from Alphabet makes money from AI. Let's just say AI takes off in the future passively. The thing that they'll suffer, and this is why Google Alphabet has not done as well as you would think in the AI space, is because the one thing that's going to suffer here dramatically is Google search bar. That is the one thing that's just really not going to be doing well, because people are already at a point where they're not going to Google, they're going to ChatGPT to ask questions. Okay. But what does it have beyond that that's going to make it profitable? It has Waymo. Okay. Number one, Waymo could be a company as valuable as Uber. Number two, it has DeepMind, which is the either number one or number two best AI lab in the world. I would put it number one. Yes, it loses out to OpenAI in terms of usage of GPT, etc. But in terms of things it does beyond LLMs, there's nothing comparing to the stuff that it does with regards to protein folding or regards to algorithmic design, etc. Okay. Then it has, beyond that, advertising. The best thing to advertise is the thing that basically is directed at a person for its particular needs. If you take the information that Google has about a person, put it through the AI systems that we have out there, it will give you a far clearer idea as to their profile or what they want, etc., than what we have currently. It will allow advertising on a far more specific level, which is really the best thing you want. You don't want to advertise 1,000 things because the swamp of information is going to stop the person from acting on it. You want to just advertise the things that this person is most likely to buy to that person, because that's most likely to result in attention as well as action. And then finally, YouTube. We are already starting to see there is an AI band called Velvet Sunset, I think it is. Okay, totally AI band, has over 1 million listeners on Spotify. We are getting to a point where content being provided by AI is up to a level that's mid-level for human beings. Songs on Spotify, maybe videos on YouTube, maybe other things on YouTube as well. And I think that also is going to translate into more profitably for Google. So Google has a whole section of stuff that's really AI focused. And if AI takes up in a really strong way, those things will rise faster than this search will fall. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of Uber / Google. Oh, and finally, when you do AI, creating it is one thing, running it is another. What do you need to run AI? A cloud. Guess who has a cloud? Guess who makes their own chips? Guess who has a specific, what they call it, transformer processing unit? Some of graphic GPUs is TPUs. Google. So yeah, Google definitely a company you must have. How the low cost in creating DeepSeek will affect the high cost in the USA. DeepSeek just shows that the Chinese are smart. No other way to put it. The Chinese are clever. You cannot keep this technology away from them long term, and that's probably one of the reasons that these guys went out and lowered the restrictions on Nvidia, because it doesn't make sense. You can't keep that level of chip away from the Chinese. They are going to make it themselves. Rather, go out and sell it to them so that you hamstrung the companies that make these chips, and so they don't have the money to make the better chips. That's the kind of argument out there. But DeepSeek's distillation technology, I think, is very important, because I mean, DeepSeek thought it was GPT-4 because you asked it questions about itself and asked, what do you think is it? Who are you? GPT-4. Why? It took GPT-4's outputs and used it to create a model, distillation. That's what it's called. Okay. You still have to create the original thing to do it, but DeepSeek just means that what you're going to see right now happen in the future is that these high-end models are going to be distilled down into smaller, more efficient, not quite as good, but 90% of the performance for maybe 10% of the price or a quarter of the price. You see what I mean? Yes, you still want to have the 100% performance when you're having the very high-end stuff, but it's really going to translate through into these really, really cheap models, maybe so cheap that they're going to be free. So you find GPT, Grok right now, if you want to have the highest level of Grok heavy, it's going to cost you about $300 a month. Okay. That is 5,000 plus rounds a month. I'm saying to you that a 5,000 plus round a month program that's very useful will be close to free in 2 years' time, based on the kind of stuff that DeepSeek has done. But look, I mean, let us not be overly how can I say, overly complimentary of the Chinese thing, or delusional about how well they've done. They've done very well, but they are still using tricks to catch up to what the Americans are doing at the moment. The Americans still lead. We have not seen a Chinese model take the lead in any of these things. Like Grok has taken the lead. We've not seen DeepSeek take the lead. What DeepSeek did was, we got almost as good as you with a fraction of the compute. It wasn't $6 million, by the way. It was more than $6 million, but it was much less than it cost to train GPT-4. I think, or close to it. DeepSeek is going to be an indication that the Chinese are going to be a threat going forward. They're going to be something that we have to take an eye out, and that's kind of the reason we got BYD in there. I know we took out Baidu, but Baidu, like I said, has for whatever reason, not taken part of this. Okay, anyone else? Oh, I've got a question here about minimum levels. We had to increase the cost of basically operating the portfolio, unfortunately, and we have raised it to okay. Brandon sent me his number. I will take that out. Brandon, give me a second. And I'll contact you maybe next week about our update on this. So I'm despite the fact that on AI portfolio, I am sometimes a bit silly about these things. So let me just take a thing about the the image here. So I know the number. I'll contact you about that next week. We buy the ADR, which is basically the one listed internationally. So yeah, we do have access to it, not directly, but we do buy it via the portfolio. You can, if you want to basically buy this thing in your own portfolio with RandSwiss, you can do it to our Swissquote or DMA accounts. You are able to do this and buy BYD directly. Okay, but no, we do these updates once every quarter. And to give you an idea, we bought Micron at the start of the year. Micron is up 40% from where we bought it in basically 6 months. I think it's come down recently. So let me just give you a confirmation of where it is right now for year to date. But understand that, as much as I want to, okay, it's up 29.7% year to date. Okay, come down a little bit in the last couple of days, but up 30% year to date. And we bought it in basically end of December 2024. So these things move a bit fast. So you can't really just be depending on us giving us the update in every quarter to decide whether to buy these things. Sometimes, for instance, with regards to when we bought a little while back, the improvement happened in like a month after we basically bought it. It happened very quickly. So we have really fast moving stocks, but some of them run for a long time. We've had Palantir from the start, and it's up, over 800% from the time we bought it, and it still continues to be very good, well performing, done like in excess of 60-70% this year alone. Okay, so yeah, BYD. If you have an account with us with either DMA or it's called a Swissquote account, you can buy it directly, or you can buy the ADR on that. Okay, anyone else? Okay, it's about 7:05. Thanks for joining me. If you have any questions, you can email me at verve@ranswers.com or email Ranswers and they'll give me the information. Like I said, we've increased the value of the minimum investment into this thing to $25,000. We had to. I mean, you can't start off at $90,000 as a minimum or entry point and then have the portfolio double or almost double, like 70% and still keep the same minimum. It's just not possible. But you know, we are trying to keep it as low as possible. You know what I mean? We are trying to keep the valuations in levels where people can enter this because we want to ensure that people are able to enter this in a reasonable way. Again, the AI portfolio is not meant to be the main portfolio. That's meant to be the global equity portfolio. This is where you put the bulk of your money. The AI portfolio is for those that have a bit of extra money that want to take part in a very fast growing industry, because when something goes up 75% in a couple of years, there's a high risk to it. I personally don't think the risk is as high as people think because I think that the technology continues to improve at a very fast rate and therefore is quite a good bet to have. But you are not probably meant to put like half your money into this. It's more about putting enough to give you access to this thing. And like I said, if you may put like a quarter of your money in it a few 2 years ago, by now it'll be up almost 70%, and so it'll be more like 40% of your money. And that I think is a good way to look at it. Okay, thanks guys for coming through, and I look forward to speaking again next time. Okay, cheers.